Welcome to the Yunusov Question. I am Pulat Yunusov, your host. I interview lawyers and judges. This show is supported by my law practice, Yunusov Law Professional Corporation. I am a commercial litigator. I've done nothing but litigation since 2011. Many of you know me or my work. I would really appreciate your referrals. They are safe with me. Thank you and enjoy the show. Hello, everyone. I'm particularly excited and honored today to welcome Marie Henein to the Yunusov Question. Hello, Marie.
Hi, how are you?
I'm very good. This is a very different introduction from what I usually say in the beginning of the episode. I guess you're a very different guest. Let's find out. So first of all, I want to tell the world, and I'm sure most people already know, about your book. This book came out in 2021. This is one of my absolute favorite biographies. This is an autobiography by Marie. It's called Nothing But the Truth. And I strongly recommend that every lawyer in Canada and in the US for that matter, read this book. It is not just valuable to you as a lawyer, but it's also interesting. I was absorbed. It kept me interesting, it kept me going, even with my attention deficit. So thank you for this. Thank you for this book, Marie. I really appreciate it. I have two copies. This copy is actually signed by you. That's a different story how I got this. Anyway, so I want to also show my favorite photo, because you have a lot of photos in this book, right? This book is as much about your family as it is about you and the justice system, right? So this is my favorite photo in the book.
That is very funny.
And I'm very proud. Yeah, I'm very proud to say that both of these children now appeared as guests on the Yunusov Question.
Exactly.
The other child being Peter Henein, who is your brother.
Yes.
Strangely, I mean, we all know that he is a comedian. So sometimes I think one of his favorite jokes, whenever you come into the picture, is that he disclaims relation with you.
Yeah, I think he does. He does that frequently, although it's a little tougher now that he's part of our firm.
Yes. I recently heard him introduce himself as partner at Henein Hutchison Robitaille LLP. So that was interesting. You are first of all, I want to ask you about this, but I want to talk a little bit more about this book. You released this book in 2021.
Yeah.
Did you, well, at the height of the pandemic, did you write any of this book during the pandemic? Okay.
No. So what happened is the book had been written and ready for release before the pandemic. Obviously, I didn't know the pandemic was coming. But just before it was about to be released, I contacted my publisher and told them that I was not ready to release it. I just felt that because it was such a personal story, and that it, I think, exposed a lot of my personal life, and having been through the public eye before and understanding what's involved with that, I just was not ready to go through it again. And I just needed some time away from the book to see whether I was saying what I wanted to say. And they were alarmed, but agreed, and said, well, can we publish it at some point? I said, yes, I just need a bit of time. And then the pandemic happened. So, you know, it looked like the most brilliant strategic move on my part, but it wasn't. It was just, it was well before it. And so I didn't pick it up during the pandemic, probably for the first 10 months, because I didn't want to read it. I wanted to stay away from it, and then did pick it up and read through it from front to back to see how I felt with some time having passed. And I felt good about releasing it. It, you know, allowed me to tweak a bit of the language. I mean, it had already gone to printing, and I did add the epilogue and the postscript to it about the pandemic. That was new, but other than that, no, I didn't change the content, and off it went. So I didn't write it during the pandemic.
You weren't huddled in your basement in a lockdown writing the book. Okay.
No.
So you said that you were through the public eye. when you were talking about some private or personal things that you wrote about in the book. I mean, that's a bit of an understatement. Some people call you the highest profile criminal lawyer in Canada, and I agree with them. Do you like this description? Do you like being called the highest profile lawyer in Canada? Or
The highest
criminal
No,
lawyer?
I like the highest profile lawyer in Canada. That works
Yeah.
for me. Yeah, I do. I like it because, having read about where I came from and what I expected, this is unexpected. So I'm not, I like it for a number of reasons. Obviously, on a personal level, it feels good that you've achieved what you set out to achieve in terms of being respected in the profession. But also for me, it is really gratifying that for the public, when they think of a criminal lawyer or a lawyer, they identify a woman in that position, that's not unusual for them, that is that you are known as a person who takes on difficult cases and is able to work through them, and that when they think of a lawyer, they think of a female criminal lawyer. That
Yeah.
makes me feel very good. Of course, I think changing people's expectations and the public's perception, and so being visible in this profession, I think, is important.
You worked in the beginning of your career with Eddie Greenspan. You worked with Eddie for many years, probably 10
Yes,
years, right?
11 years. Yeah,
Yes, 11 years. You would say that he trained you as a criminal lawyer. Would you agree with that?
I would. I mean, I joined his firm because for me, he was the epitome of what I thought a criminal lawyer should be. He was what I wanted to be as in terms of skills as a lawyer. So, I got to see his cross examinations. I got to see how he prepared a case. I learned all of that by being there and working with him and watching him and bugging him relentlessly with my questions, and also working with Mark Rosenberg on the appeal side.
Yeah.
It was what I wanted. I wasn't forced into it. That was the place I was so desperate to learn from. And now, being in this profession for 3 decades, it was the right place for me. For me, it worked. It worked. It did exactly what I hoped it would do in terms of learning and improving my skills.
Do you think he was your predecessor in this line of the highest profile criminal lawyers or lawyers in Canada? Do you think he was the highest profile lawyer in his time?
He was. And when you say predecessor, you assume that I thought anyone would ever be as high profile as him. I never did. I remember in his office, he would have all of these framed articles about him. And I would, when he wasn't there, I'd go back and read them. I was, so dazzled by him and what he had accomplished. And I would say to him, do you realize how incredible you are? Because there will be nobody in our lifetime that will have this profile. That the idea that a criminal lawyer would be a household name is just unheard of. It's such an incredible thing. And so he had resonated with the public in a way that no lawyer had, and I never in my wildest dreams thought another lawyer would. So I was very aware of his contribution to the public's perception of what lawyers are. And, he spent months talking on a circuit about anti-death penalty. I mean, he's very committed to our justice system. And I just never thought we'd see that again. I just never anticipated it. And it wasn't what I was directing my career to. I just wanted to be very good at law. I wanted to be a good lawyer, more than a good lawyer. I wanted to be the best lawyer that I could conceivably be. That was my focus. That was where I thought I could control my career. You can never control the rest of it.
If you could choose, what would you choose? The highest profile lawyer or the best lawyer?
The best lawyer.
The best lawyer.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
I'm really interested in your evolution as a lawyer, as a criminal lawyer, as a public person, and I'm interested in the evolution of your persona. So I'm going to do something that I only did once before when I interviewed Associate Chief Fairburn. And you know what? We will talk about her too today, I think.
Okay.
because there is a connection. But I want to share my screen and I want to show you something. So this
Yeah.
is a globe. You've been on the globe a few times. You're familiar.
Yeah.
You're I guess one could say that they like you or they like writing about you. So this article is from 2009, so a while ago. And I think Scott Hutchison wasn't your partner. You didn't have Hutchison, Henein Hutchison LLP at the time, because here we have a quote from Scott where he talks about you as a someone who is not associated with him.
Hmm.
Scott Hutchison, a former Crown attorney, and he says a lot of good things about you here. But I'm interested in you here, right? In this photograph. This is a close-up.
Hmm.
And this is you in 2009.
Yeah.
And this is an article from from 2 years ago when your book
Right.
was
Right.
published. This is 2021, and
Yeah.
this is the close-up.
Yeah.
So I talked to Danielle Robitaille on the show last year, and one of the questions I asked her is why half of the people on your law firm page look like nerds and half of the people look like professional models.
Hmm.
So with you, the interesting transformation is I consider myself a nerd. Like I think the best litigators are nerds, but in 2009, you look like a nerd, and in 2021, you look like a Hollywood star. So what happened over the years? Is this deliberate? Um, uh,
Well,
is
you
this
didn't
a
see what I.
strategy?
No, it's not a deliberate strategy. You didn't see what I look like when I'm not sitting in my robes. I think I look like a star before then. So maybe I need to send you some other pictures.
Yes, we need to see those some
Yeah.
of those other pictures. I
Yeah.
actually
Yeah.
like your picture from 2009
Yeah, but
because
I've loved fashion my whole life. Some are good choices, some are not. But I was wearing. Oh, I used to go to a girls' high school, which was a uniform Catholic school, but we'd have like one day a month where you could wear whatever you want. And my uncle was living in New York and would bring back clothes for me. I was going to school in high school in leather pants, so no, I've always loved fashion. My hair was different colors throughout the years. It just happens on the moment you photograph me. Some are good shots, some are not. But I have to confess, I've been a fashion victim my whole life. So some have been hitting, some hit, some miss. Yeah. So
I'm curious about the connection between style and criminal law.
there is none.
There is none.
No, there
Well,
is none. I mean, I could do the job. I always tell people, I could do the job wearing Birkenstocks and pajamas. So you shouldn't confuse a person's, and for women in particular, because men change over the years as well, as you know.
yeah.
Very little attention is paid to what they wear or what they look like or whether their hair is straight or long or short. It's really wrong, and it's a tendency to confuse women's appearance with their ability. I'm not in a profession where I make money off my appearance. If I did, it would be a relevant consideration. I make it based on what my skill is as a lawyer, and how I choose to present myself obviously is professional because I represent my clients. But beyond that, it's really not for anybody to draw anything from, other than I like to wear what I like to wear, and I'll continue to do that. But it would be a big mistake to confuse the two.
I agree with you. I think men in general look very boring. That's why everybody talks about
Well,
women.
I tend to agree with you. They do.
Uh, so criminal trials are very different from civil trials, especially in Canada. You often advocate in front of a jury. Do you think fame helps win cases in criminal law?
No, I don't think so. First of all, it has nothing to do with it. When you have a high profile case, what it means is all eyes are on everybody, on the judge, on the prosecution, on the defense. And so you are under a microscope in a way that often, as you know, when we practice, we are not. And people are slightly more relaxed. So the scrutiny is more intense when you have a high profile case. So, fame doesn't get you anything other than more scrutiny, which is not
Mhm.
necessarily uh, the best way to have to litigate, or the best circumstances to litigate in. I think for young lawyers listening, what experience gets you and what credibility gets you, and credibility is something that you earn and you develop um, in having confidence with judges and with crown attorneys, that they know you're a person to be relied on, and that you mean what you say. Um, what that gives you is a bit of runway when you are arguing in court, whether it's a trial or an appeal. You might get the benefit of the doubt, and by that I mean the court will let you expand your position, because sometimes you can't say it in 5 minutes. You need to develop your position, so you'll get the courtesy, the indulgence of saying, okay, you know what, I'm not buying it, but I'm going to let you try to convince me. I'm going to let you go a little bit. And so that runway, I think, is what you get with experience and seniority, and demonstrating that you're somebody that doesn't waste the court's time. And that's very valuable to a client, because it's very difficult, as you know, sometimes to articulate or to get to what you want when you don't have an ability to build the narrative, or get that leeway. So that's what I think it gets you. But the being known part, I don't know that alone helps a whole lot.
Do you think you have any special or additional credibility with a jury when you do a jury trial?
I think they may be more interested in you. There are numerous jury studies that look at clients and look at their lawyers. And obviously, if a jury likes the lawyer, they tend to be more willing to listen to you. There is a natural tendency for the public to identify a client with their lawyer. And so that may have a bit of an impact, but I don't know that it carries the day at all.
What is the number one difference between advocating to a judge and advocating to a jury, in your opinion?
Well, with a judge, you at least know generally what they're thinking. A jury is completely imperceptible. It's impossible to understand what is going on. And as we see in cases, let's say that you do hear about what a jury was thinking in the States in particular. It's quite shocking and surprising what impacted them, what didn't impact them, what they were thinking about. The good thing about a judge generally is they will tell you, look, I'm having a problem with this part of your argument, or I'm having a problem with this position. And so you have a chance at least to address it. I don't know. I find juries impossible to determine. And because of that, people will find that in a case where it's so hard, often you will go with a jury, because you never know what they're going to do.
Do you think advocating to a jury is more of an art and advocating to a judge is more of a science then? So
No,
you have sort of more room to play when you're advocating to a jury?
No, I think advocacy is an art across the board.
Mhm.
Whether it's a judge or a jury, if they don't want to listen to you, if they're not buying the position you're advancing, if you're not being persuasive, if you're not landing your points at the time you need to land them, if you're not telling a story or a narrative, which as lawyers, I think we forget that is what we are doing. We are laying out a narrative, and we have to be compelling in that narrative. If you're not able to do that with a judge or a jury, in written or oral advocacy, you're going to fail. So they both require that skill set.
Speaking of skill sets and how you develop skill sets, I want to go back to your book, and I want to go back to your upbringing. When I read this book, I felt that this was a book filled with trauma. I, of course, had similar feelings or similar experience here in Canada as an immigrant. I came to Canada many years ago. Maybe I was a little bit older than when you came here, but a lot of what you said in your book struck a chord. But it's also a lot of trauma. What we call trauma now, maybe we didn't use this word 20, 30 years ago. How did this trauma influence you? How did it affect your career choices? How did it affect your life strategy? is what you're doing now, and are you good at what you're doing now because you have a lot of scar tissue from what happened during your childhood and when you came to Canada in particular?
Well, I don't think, it's interesting. I guess I didn't see it as trauma. I think maybe I have seen so much of it in my business that it pales in comparison to what so many people we know go through on a daily basis. Um, what I did try to capture and what I hoped would resonate was the experience of being an immigrant, because that is the most lasting thing for me. And I don't think people who don't have that experience understand how lost we are when we come to this country in so many ways, not just linguistically, but culturally. And the intergenerational development and getting your roots here is so different for each of us. My parents experienced Canada differently than my grandparents, differently than I did, differently than my brother did, who was born here. And so it really is very much a part of who I am. And that certainly is something that is with me. And I think it's with all of us. So it's not surprising to me that you say that it resonated, because I think so many of us, wherever you're from, have this experience. And North America is not white North America is not the experience of the rest of the world. And so when you come here, you feel disoriented. There's a little bit of discomfort. You don't feel like you fit in, for sure. And the not fitting in one is the one that probably I would carry the longest. And I have to say, I was surprised with where the book started and where it ended, because at the end of the day, it sort of ended in the same place. And that surprised me, that I thought, wow, you're here at this stage in your life, you're older, and you still feel that sense of not belonging, of being, an outsider, that just doesn't seem to melt away for me anyway. I was surprised by that. I think that would be the biggest sort of revelation for me, that it's so deep that it just doesn't go. It's always part of you.
You talk about being other in your book. Other, of course, is a term of art used to describe experiences of various groups that don't belong to the mainstream in a particular society. And you consider yourself other. Do you still consider yourself other?
I think there were experiences that, as I write about in the book, I think to a certain extent, the good thing that came from on a personal level from the profile that happened in my career was that Canadians reached out to me and would say, "You're a good Canadian. You represent our justice system. You explain our justice system. You make us proud of our justice system." And that feeling of being embraced by Canadians was incredibly, deeply meaningful to me and to my family. That moment was significant to me, I would say, of all in my life, and not feeling as much of another. But the truth is, you can't miss it, right? You can't miss it in the profession, in the world, that you're another because you're female. You can't miss it because you're not white, because you're an immigrant, you're from a different country. I mean, that always exists. And the keys to the kingdom are still pretty tightly held by a very specific and select group of people. And so nobody wants interlopers, and you feel that, for sure. I still feel that. I would be naive to think the doors have been thrown open and the red carpet's been rolled out. It has not.
So you talked about some resolution of this status of other that occurred, I assume, recently, when people acknowledged your contributions. You have had a long career. You've been practiced law for decades. Now, finally, this acknowledgement, this recognition is coming, and finally, that resolution of being other is here, at least partial. But in the beginning, when nobody knew you, when you were struggling, and I'm sure you were struggling in the beginning, every new lawyers struggling. You worked very hard. People didn't accept you as one of their own, and you talk about that in your book. And the beginning, when the other syndrome was at its highest, were you ever mad at Canada? Were you ever mad at the society for othering you, for even before you were a lawyer? Here in the book, you write that at Christmas time, you insisted that your family do away with Arabic food so we could have a real Christmas. Uh, did you ever feel that this society uh, put you up against your own family, confronted you with your own family, because your own family would never had a hope of overcoming the otherness? You knew that. Were you ever mad at Canada for putting you in this situation?
I was never mad at Canada. I was mad at the people that held a lock on access and excluded so many of us. And look at the United States. It excludes a significant part of the population, the African American population. We do here, the indigenous. I mean, we have a history. Colonialism comes from somewhere. It's all about exclusion and control. I was never mad at Canada. And I will tell you that in my early part of my career, I was so focused on busting through and getting good at what I did that I did not care about anything else. Like I just was not distracted by that. I didn't even think about how people looked at me. I didn't feel any of that. I was just so focused on trying to deal with my work and trying to get good at it. I think, as you get older and as you get a little lonelier in this profession, you sort of look around and go, well, wait a second, where is everybody? Because at 30 years out, there's a few women in the defense bar left at this vintage. And you look around and, you're still attending meetings where they're all males at the meetings and all male lawyers. It's impossible to miss. And so, it does hit you a little bit because you stuck around so long and you have a moment to look up. And when you look up, do you love what you see? Not necessarily. But I never had an anger towards Canada, because you have to understand, I grew up, my family was so happy to be in Canada. My parents, my father, and my mother came here for the opportunity, particularly for a young girl. They knew what it would look like in the Middle East and what it would look like here. So for me, I grew up being told this is why we came, like it's because of this country. And so I wasn't disappointed in that at all. But you do look around, and as I said, you see who's got a lock on positions of power and positions of authority, and that needs to be changed.
Do you think people go into criminal law? Some people who go into criminal law because they want to stick it to the man, because they want to stick it to those who are in a position of power and authority, to the establishment, to the elites. Do you think that's the case?
I really think, if you go to a criminal lawyers conference, you can't miss that there's a certain type of person drawn to spending your life on the other side of the government. And that's really what you are doing. And often you're spending your life on the other side of the government with people that are not particularly well liked. So you have to be oppositional by nature. I think that is what you see in criminal lawyers. And why I loved criminal law is they are uncowed, they're just not frightened by that fight. They don't care. They take on these fights, and so many of them win them. Such fundamental fights in our country and in the United States. You can't have that fight unless you feel that way, that you don't care. You don't care that it's the government, it's the state, it's the man. That's not going to dissuade you from doing what you want to do and assert your rights and assert the rights of other people. So I love that about the personality of criminal lawyers. They are renegades. They are revolutionary in that way.
Yes, and they are fighting the man, they're fighting the establishment by fighting prosecutors, because prosecutors are employees of the government. And for many people, the government is an agent of the establishment, of the elites. I here do not necessarily subscribe to that theory, but I'm sure that you've heard of this theory before, that prosecution is acting on behalf of those who influence the government the most. And I don't know, do you have any thoughts about it?
Well, I do. I mean, we have a bit of a different structure here in Canada than in the United States. And in Canada, a little bit, uh, more than a little bit, actually, it's important to remember that our prosecutors have an obligation not only to the government but to the accused as well. They are to act fairly, and most of them, in my experience, take that role on very, very seriously. You wouldn't get charges withdrawn, you wouldn't get them reviewing cases, you wouldn't see prosecutors making the tough decisions that they make every single day when they are looking at all the constellation of factors and looking both at the public interest and also fairness to the accused. That view, because we don't have elected prosecutors, is very different in the United States, where some of them run for office and they feel like they have to run on platforms that are get tough on crime platforms. And the relationship between prosecutors and defense lawyers is very acrimonious in the United States and very different in Canada, at least in most parts of Canada. I will confess, I've had experiences where the relationship between the defense and the prosecution bar is nastier than perhaps other provinces that I'm used to. But most of my life and my experience has been with prosecutors that are really very, very conscientious and trying to do the right thing and take their role very seriously. So,
And of course, you went up against some formidable prosecutors,
of course,
such as, for example, Michael Fairbairn, who is now at the very top of our judiciary here in Ontario, and also Scott
yeah,
Hutchison.
yes, who's my partner?
He's your partner, a
Yes.
long-time partner. So how did that chemistry work? So I guess it helped that in Canada, the relationship between prosecution and defense is not that acrimonious.
Right.
But I mean, they're still opposing counsel. Don't you hate crowns sometimes? Don't you feel that you hate them? Don't you feel that you are really in a dogfight? What is the real story there between defense counsel and crowns? Because I of course come from the commercial litigation background. I'm a commercial litigator 100%. And my personal story of evolution of the relationship with opposing counsel is, as I grew more experienced, as I started doing much better cases, much better working with better clients, bigger files, my relationship with opposing counsel improved because more, I guess, better lawyers tend to work on bigger files. Do you think that all Crown prosecutors that you have dealt with are good? They uphold this duty to the accused that you mentioned. The relationship is always collaborative. How does that theory work with this idea that we have oppression, or with this theory that we have oppression in Canada? You mentioned the Indigenous people, you mentioned the Black people, that they are oppressed, that people plea out because they don't have the money to fight, that this is not really all rosy and ideal. How does this theory that the relationship is collaborative work with the fact that a lot of people claim that the oppression exists in Canada in the justice system?
Well, let me just say, my practice in the last few years has involved a great deal of civil and commercial litigation. So I've had an opportunity late in my career to have an upfront view of what the dynamic is on that side of things, and what it's like in the criminal bar. And it's very interesting to me because whenever these conversations are had, the assumption is that the criminal bar needs to has the problem with civility. That is not the case. And I've spent quite a bit of time sort of trying to understand what is going on. I'll tell you that in the criminal bar, if we wrote the sorts of letters that go across in the civil and commercial bar, you would have no relationship with a prosecutor. What you would be told is you're not to be dealt with. You're a person not to be relied on, not to be trusted. In the criminal bar, you would never send a letter confirming a conversation, because the idea that you would resile from a conversation would be a career ender for you. It would be known to the judges and to the prosecutors that you are never to be trusted, and you would have a very difficult time working in the business. And so when I thought about why it is that, the Crowns and the defense bar is much more collegial, it's because we have longstanding relationships. I prosecuted or I defended cases where Scott or Mikkel were on the other side for years and years. So we were seeing each other constantly in court. How can you not become friends when you are seeing each other constantly? You're going through the same battles constantly with each other. And you have to remember that prosecutors hold a great deal of authority. And so you want them to listen to you. You want them to give your client the benefit of the doubt. I always hear clients say, oh, my lawyer is fighting with the prosecutor. And I always say, well, how does that help you? That person holds such a great deal of authority over your welfare that you want them to like your lawyer, not hate your lawyer. So because we have an ongoing relationship in criminal law, because you're constantly up against the same people, your reputation is an important thing. On the civil bar, you can have a case once with someone and never see them again in another case, or there are 20 lawyers on a case. And there is a feeling that your client runs the show in a way that you don't see on the criminal side. And so I got to tell you, you should come over. It's much more collegial on the criminal side of things.
Come over, try dabbling criminal law, you mean?
Try to dabble a little bit.
You know what? You preempt my questions. It seems like you have this power of foresight, and you just know where the conversation is going. I've never had this before, and I've interviewed.
Did I ruin the interview?
No. You in fact you're putting the interview in the right direction. You sending it on the right course. I was going to talk about the civil component of your practice and of your firm. And it's interesting how much earlier in the conversation you talked about the obligation of the Crown to the accused, and you contrasted our prosecutors to American prosecutors. And I remembered my own experience. I did dabble in quasi-criminal law in the beginning of my career. I defended someone against charges under the Occupational Health and Safety Act. So I dealt with not with the Crown, I guess, with someone from the ministry that prosecuted that under that statute. And once this is just to echo your statements about the duty to the accused. Once my clients were ready for resolution, I emailed that ministry lawyer, and I told him my clients are ready to settle because they don't want to fight this, they don't want to spend any more money on this. His response: no. I don't want to accept this. They have to be absolutely certain. I have to make sure that they're doing this because this is what they want, not because they feel forced to do this, to plea. And this wasn't even a criminal case. It was under provisional statute. So this is an example, I guess, of what you were talking about, that they have this special duty to the accused. You recently, relatively recently, expanded your scope, the scope of your law firm, and you've had Alex for a long time, Alex Smith, a great partner at your firm who did civil litigation, but he was probably the only one, right, doing civil litigation.
And Scott was doing civil.
Scott Hutchison?
Yeah,
Hutchison?
Scott Hutchison has been doing civil for the last probably 15 years of his career.
Oh, wow, that's amazing. I didn't know that, but maybe I just I've never reasoned to that level and caliber, so I've never really crossed paths. But I'm curious about the expansion here at your firm, right? And I interviewed Eva Krajewska, a wonderful partner at your firm, on the show. She's great. Recently, you had a new hire, someone named Peter Henein, no relation. No relation. And he's also a partner at your firm. And of course, he's a formidable civil litigator with many years of experience. and I also interviewed him on the show. So what's going on? I mean, I've come across criminal lawyers who dabble in civil litigation. I've come across real estate lawyers who
Right.
dabble in civil litigation. My experience was not good with them as opposing
Yeah.
counsel.
So,
This is
so
different. This is dramatically
interesting.
different. What's going on? Tell us about
So
this.
let me tell you what was originally going on. You know, when Scott joined the firm, and we had many discussions. Scott had been out of the Crown's office. He had been working at a civil litigation firm. He'd been at Stockwoods, and so
Oh,
that's what
right.
he'd been doing for years. And we had many conversations. It was all pie in the sky, of course. I have to say, some of them were alcohol infused, but we were talking about the idea that there were numerous litigation boutiques out there, but that the old view of a true barrister, where you would have the lawyers doing a murder trial one day and a civil jury trial the next, we seem to have gotten away from that. And so all the litigation boutiques grew out of a civil litigation corps. And what we talked about was it possible to grow a litigation boutique out of a criminal corps? That's where it started. And how would we develop that? Because we thought that the training you get as a litigator on the criminal side is invaluable. It doesn't mean that everyone can do both, but how would you create a firm that was a litigation, known as a litigation boutique firm, but we're starting with this core of criminal strength? And that was always the hope and the plan. And we added Alex, and then we began adding associates and partners, and I began veering off into that area a little bit more. And that's how we've grown to 24 lawyers now in this firm. And our split is half criminal, half civil. In those teams of criminal and civil litigators, there are some litigators that cross over. So Scott would be one. I am one of them. Our partner Jennifer does both criminal and civil. So there are some litigators that will do both. And there are some that are specific to the criminal, the civil, and the regulatory. So that was the inception. It was really, we had no blueprint for it. We didn't know if it would work. And it has developed in the way we're so happy. It has developed in the way that we had hoped, that you have this litigation boutique firm with expertise in both civil and criminal. And we do think it is a valuable experience, and it works for us. All the litigation boutiques are experts in their areas and are excellent as well. Our core, our origin story is slightly different.
Civil litigators have an inferiority complex when it comes to trials, and criminal lawyers. There is a common theory or view among civil litigators that because criminal lawyers do vastly more trials, they're much better at trials. Now that you've been exposed to civil commercial litigation, that you have a powerful force in your firm that deals only with civil commercial litigation, do you think this theory is actually true? And I'm not bashing criminal lawyers here. Of course, criminal lawyers do a lot of trials. Of course, they're good at trials. But civil litigation is much more about trial than about trials. It's actually not about trials. Most civil cases don't go to trials. It is as much about motions and negotiations and, I don't know, letters memorializing phone calls than it is about trials. Do you think civil litigators really can learn something from criminal lawyers when it comes to civil litigation, which is document intensive, which is not as much about he said, she said, as it is as criminal trials are, which is not as much about cross-examination as criminal trials are. Sometimes you don't even call your client as a witness in criminal trials. I don't think it's conceivable in commercial trial not to call your client or client's representative as witnesses. I don't think it's even conceivable. In criminal trials, this is a valid strategy. So do you think civil litigators can really learn from criminal lawyers, and what can they learn?
Well, I think if you look at England, where a barrister does criminal and civil, a true barrister, and you look at our history of the judges like former Chief Justice Stubben, who did all of those things. They practiced both civil and criminal. you would know that there is a great deal you can learn from active trial experience, because being a good trial lawyer, being an advocate, is not just about cross-examination. You advocate, as I tell young lawyers, from the moment you speak to a prosecutor, you speak to the other side, you're in the mode of advocacy. That's your job. You're not calling them for a casual conversation. So the art of advocacy is much more complicated than simply standing up and doing an effective cross-examination or going to trial. And so what I think the value is, because motions, cases are won and lost on motions, and negotiation, which is a real art form, requires an understanding of strategy, an understanding of law. I wish people would remember that you can't win a case if you don't know what the law is. You have to construct your case based on what the legal analysis is. So you have to see the end game so that you can see your pathway through it. I think there are a lot of skills that you can learn to make you an effective lawyer in either scenario. And I think what you see, my experience has been in meeting lawyers from states and from here that are really talented. The talented lawyers are lawyers that have the very same skill set. You know, I sit on the Supreme Court Advocacy Institute, and so we have people who are appearing in the Supreme Court come, and we strike a panel, and we have them do a dry run through. And what always amazes me is often you'll have a criminal lawyer, a civil litigator, and a mix. But the really good ones, you all end up in the same place. You all approach the case with the same sort of analysis and same sort of questions. So no, I think being an advocate, you can learn by stretching yourself in a lot of different directions. I don't think they're distinct skill sets.
Can you talk a little bit about the interaction between the criminal and the civil side at your firm? What does it look like? Maybe give a few examples, or is there a wall between them? They never talk to each other. What is it like? Can you give a few examples?
No, we are very much a cohesive firm. You know, we have lunch together all the time. We're together all the time, and our floors are mixed. So you've got civil and criminal lawyers on different floors, and we will, for young associates in particular, we like to move them around in both areas, particularly if somebody's expressed an interest. We like them to have experience across the board. We are of the view that it makes you a better lawyer to learn skills. And you know, the difficulty with civil cases is they don't often get to trial. So we, you know, give opportunities to civil lawyers to sit in on trials, to see how they work, to understand how you do an examination for discovery. You have to learn how to do an examination. And so those are transferable skills. And so we like to see as much of a mix as possible, just to give opportunity to again develop that basic skill set that we think is critical.
I want to talk a little bit about recruitment at your firm, and maybe it will become more relevant now that you lost Christine to who was appointed to the provincial court. She was appointed as a justice of the provincial court. Also a wonderful person. You know, I met all of these people at your summer party, which you missed last year.
Yeah, because I had COVID.
Yeah, because I don't. Yeah, you said that. So, but it was an amazing party. So I want to talk a little bit about recruitment at your firm. You have a lot of young associates. Who are you looking for? What kind of qualities are you looking for? Is your recruitment very similar to those big basic firms, or do you have some shtick that only you do?
No, we don't have a shtick. I mean, I don't do the recruitment. I'm not on the front lines of recruitment anymore. We have Rose Yanko, the director of professionalism at the firm. She's in charge of all the programs and the front line of the recruitment, and the other partners are as well. But often people will just write and say, I'm interested in your firm, and we will meet with them. What are we looking for? We are looking for people who have a real passion for what they do. We are looking for stars. We really are. We are always looking for people that we think are just not grinding out memos, but have the capacity to be serious litigators. We're always looking for that. And we are looking for people who are strong academically as well, because I think that is a value. So, you know, that comes in all shapes and sizes.
How did you get Jennifer Brewerka, who is, of course, a star U.S. attorney, an American who came to Canada and
Yeah.
joined the firm, now a partner at your firm?
Well, we have two lawyers that were American trained that are in our firm. Jennifer is a partner. The other is David Postel, who worked in Chicago. And she applied. She was interested in moving to Canada. She was sick of, I think, I don't want to put words in her mouth, but I think she was distressed by what was happening in the United States and felt that Canada had a lot to offer, and it does. And we're so happy to have her. You know, it's interesting to see American style advocacy, which is, slightly different, but we're conservative in Canada. And it's been fun seeing that. But at the end of the day, the skill set really is the same. A good lawyer anywhere has the same instincts, the same skill set, and it's been great having her.
You talked a lot about the U.S. today. Are you expanding into the United States?
No, no, it's a little late in my life anyway to expand in the United States. Who knows? Maybe the firm will after I'm long gone.
Eddie Greenspan tried that with one case, if you remember. Do you
Mhm.
think it worked out for him, or do you think he regretted it at the end?
No, I think they were very lucky to have him. He was extraordinary. As if you read the articles about what he did, Dominic Dunn, one of the greatest criminal writers, one of the writers for Vanity Fair, was blown away by the work that Eddie did. So again, proving my point, because I'm always right, that if you are a talented lawyer, it's hard to miss that talent. So I don't think he regretted it, and he held his own and then some. He was a star here, and he would have been a star in the United States as well.
In conclusion, some words for our young lawyers who are watching this, for law students. If they want to be litigators, and I mean stars, should they go into criminal law or civil litigation?
They should go into the area that they feel strongest about, because to get there requires a great deal of work and effort. And the only reason you're prepared to do it is because you believe so profoundly in what you're doing, that it's the right choice for you personally, that it's the thing that interests you, that feeds your mind in particular and your soul. And so that, all of the rough roads, and there are rough roads, as you know, nobody rolls through this smoothly, and as you say, without scars. There's always scars. It's a tough business. It's a very tough business. So at the end of it, you gotta, or in the middle of it, you gotta look up and say, you know what, this is right for me. And I remember my mom says, 2 weeks into working at Eddie's office, I called her and I said, this is it. I'm in the right place. I know that this is where I need to be. And I always felt that way. And so I would like young lawyers to not be afraid to follow their interest and their passion. You will succeed in it. We are lucky and fortunate in this business to be well paid at our job. So that shouldn't be the thing you're worried about. You should be focused on what feeds you and where you think you're going to shine. And we shine. Every lawyer has different skill sets. So for some it's litigation, for some it's regulatory, for some it's policy. I mean, I was talking today to somebody and saying, Justice Wilson was not a litigator, and she was on the Supreme Court. So many people who ended up on the Supreme Court weren't litigators. So there's a lot of paths in this profession. You got to just find the one that really feeds your soul, because otherwise it's a really lousy way to spend the majority of your life.
This has been Marie Henein, everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you.